a point of no return.
He felt he had been done wrong. He said that he should have killed her, and it seemed that after that, that's when the rampage began.
Ridgway argued, you know, if I had only killed my second wife, I would never have killed these prostitutes. You know, I was really trying to get her.
It's easy not to believe Ridgway's claim. People close to the case think he would have killed sooner or later anyway. But whatever his true motive, a bit more than a year after Ridgway's divorce, the bodies of young women started turning up alongside the Green River.
I remember when the first victim was found, we actually thought that perhaps it was domestic violence, some sort of isolated case, and then here comes another one and another one. And there was just a feeling of dismay, of disbelief.
Nobody else knew it at the time, but the killer was Gary Ridgway. The victims were women who in his mind were as easy to hate as the wives who had left him.
He regarded women who were prostitutes as totally expendable and less than human. In fact, he told police that he regarded them as garbage.
He would take them to his house, or one of those secluded spots near the river where he'd once made love to Marcia. Then he'd make sure they were completely naked, so the victim's clothes would contain no evidence of the crime. Then it was usually a forearm around the neck, without warning, from behind.
It was up close and personal, lots of physical contact. He would literally squeeze the last gasp of breath from his dying victim's body. And the more that she pled and begged and screamed, the better he felt about himself.
And he compounded his excitement later. Sex with the victim before the crime wasn't enough, so he'd often return to the riverbank where he dumped his victims and fornicate again with the corpses.
He created a system of burying them near where he could get at them and use them and reuse them until there were maggots or flies there. That's having sex until they almost deteriorate.
Frankly, I don't know the psychological reasons behind what he did, but according to Mr. Ridgway at least, his reasoning was that it was simply free. It was a date, a sexual act that he did not have to pay for.
Once Gary Ridgway tasted the thrill of murder, he found it irresistible.
There's no doubt in my mind that he thoroughly enjoyed the killing, and the more he did it, the more he enjoyed it.
And all the while, he was acting as father to a son barely 7 years old. Though he wasn't thrilled when Matthew was born, over the years they started spending more time together. After the divorce, he had Matthew every other weekend, and he shamelessly used that fact to reel in his victims.
In the house where he did many of his killings, you could put someone at ease by saying, well, here's my son's room, and there's toys, and why would a guy with a son, he's not going to hurt me.
It shows you just how crafty he was. He was able to use his son as a ploy to assure his victim that he was innocuous, that he was harmless.
Matthew even met at least one victim. The boy was in the truck when Ridgway took her to a secluded spot in the woods.
He drove her to a remote location, told the boy to stay in the truck, and then he disappeared into the woods with the woman and then came back without her. And his little boy asked, you know, well, Dad, where's the girl? And he said, oh, she walked home. She lives near here.
Ridgway didn't care at all about his son. You know, it's you know, use people, use them as instruments to meet his needs. He did that with his son, he did that with his wives, and he certainly did that with his victims.
By January 1984, the body count along the Green River was up to 13. A desperate police force tried to put the pieces together and find the killer. For Gary Ridgway, the game of evasion was just beginning. There was little to celebrate in Seattle as the new year began in 1984. For nearly 2 years, the Green River Killer had methodically murdered one young woman after another. The body count stood at 13, and King County Sheriff's detectives were growing frustrated.
It is challenging. There is a perpetrator out there, there's a killer on the loose who has evaded our efforts to apprehend him.
Within a month, those efforts were enhanced with the formation of the Green River Task Force. The 50-person unit assembled a massive list of suspects from tips called into a hotline, from known sex offenders, and from every other possible source.
Just the sheer volume of what we had, 12 to 15,000 suspects.
You had priests in women's underwear out there. You had child counselors out there with kiddie porn. There are a lot of men who at the end of the day take off their tie, go out to the strip, and they're looking for something kinky.
One of those men was Gary Ridgway.
Ridgway's plan was pure and simple. Make a deal with a young lady on the street, whisk them away in his truck, and they are never to be seen again.
Well, Mr. Ridgway thought about killing all of the time. It was basically every waking moment.
When he ate, when he slept, when he even probably made love to his wife, he was thinking of killing and abusing a woman in the woods. That's his day.
And once his thoughts were put into action,
he was a perfect killing machine, in my opinion. He didn't have a conscience. He enjoyed what he was doing.
It was a game, and he was winning.
One ploy that Ridgway used to keep police guessing, he frequently repainted the various pickup trucks he used to cruise the strip. Hoping to stop the killer's winning streak, members of the task force wanted to get inside the mind of this serial killer. They even sought the opinion of another prolific serial killer who once stalked the Pacific Northwest, Ted Bundy.
He had written us a letter and said, "Why don't you come down and talk to me? I think I can help you understand the mind of the Riverman," as he called Ridgway. He said he's probably attracted to pornography. He likes the hunt. He likes the power and authority over his victims. He will go back and he'll have sex with the dead bodies. And certainly that gave us an insight that we didn't have before.
In fact, the position of some of the bodies led investigators to suspect that the Green River Killer was revisiting his corpses for sex. A few bodies were found with rocks placed inside their sexual organs, but Ridgway was leaving no real clues behind. Each time the remains of a potential victim were discovered, investigators pored over the crime scene, collecting evidence, looking for the tiniest clue.
What were we looking for? Anything. Potential hair transfers, paint chips, glass, clothing damage, anything.
The collection of evidence continued once the bodies were sent for autopsy, where the medical examiner was able to retrieve semen from some of them. Slowly, carefully, the evidence was being stored away that might someday identify the elusive Green River Killer, who always seemed to be one step ahead of his pursuers.
Everything we did as a task force was, of course, reported. So it was reported on the news. We were going to have surveillance. So he would visit one site and place a victim, and then go to a different site and place a victim. He learned a lot from all of us, unfortunately.
But Ridgway's deceptive talents did not mean he was invisible to the police. Police knew he was a frequent customer